Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through an otherwise featureless stretch of countryside. Michelle stared out the window of her parents' old sit-in, watching the scenery blur past. The air inside the car was thick with tension, her mother's lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line, her father gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Her younger brother, Ethan, sat smugly in the back seat, scrolling through his phone, the blue light reflecting in his eyes. "You're being selfish, Michelle," her mother finally said, breaking the suffocating silence. "Your brother needs that money more than you do." Michelle exhaled slowly, keeping her voice steady. "No, Mom. That's my money. I worked for it. I saved every dime. I'm not just handing it over because Ethan wasted his again." Her father's jaw tightened. Without another word, he flicked the turn signal and pulled the car to the shoulder of the road, gravel crunching under the tires. Michelle's stomach dropped. This wasn't a stop for gas. This was something else. "Get out," her father ordered, his voice cold. Michelle turned to look at him, expecting some hint of hesitation, some sign that this was a cruel joke. But there was none. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother folded her arms across her chest, her smirk unwavering. "Figure out how to get home on your own." Ethan snickered from the back seat. "Bet you wish you'd just given me the money now, huh?" Michelle's hands curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. She had expected manipulation, guilt-tripping, maybe even emotional blackmail. But this? Being abandoned on the side of the road like she was disposable. That was a new low, even for them. For a moment, she considered pleading, demanding they reconsider. But then, a slow realization settled over her, cooling the anger that had flared in her chest. They thought they had control over her. They thought she was helpless without them. They were wrong. Michelle pulled out her phone and pressed a contact on speed dial. The dial tone barely rang once before a smooth voice answered. "I'm ready," she said simply. Her parents frowned, confused. Before they could say another word, the low, steady hum of helicopter blades cut through the air. A sleek black helicopter descended toward the road, its powerful gusts kicking up dust and stray leaves. The elegant insignia on the side of the aircraft gleamed in the afternoon sun. Her parents' expressions shifted from smug amusement to wide-eyed disbelief as the helicopter landed smoothly on a nearby patch of land. The doors opened, and out stepped Gareth Lewis, his sharp suit barely creased, his stance exuding confidence. My mother's smirk had vanished completely, her lips parted in shock. My father's fingers twitched at his sides as he struggled to process what was happening. My younger brother, the one they had so fiercely defended, looked between me and Gareth, confusion written all over his face. Gareth barely spared them a glance before turning his attention to me. "Michelle, are you ready?" His voice was calm, steady, completely unaffected by the chaos around him. I nodded, but I wasn't done yet. Turning to my parents, I let my voice drop to a cold, cutting tone. "You told me to figure out how to get home." "I did." My mother stepped forward, her voice shrill with desperation. "Who is this man? Where are you going?" Gareth answered before I could. "I'm her business partner." He glanced at my parents, his gaze impassive. "And I assure you, she's in good hands." The words sent a visible jolt through them. My father's brow furrowed. "Business partner," he repeated, like the concept was foreign to him. I folded my arms. "Yes. You never cared to ask about my career, did you? You just assumed I'd always be there to hand over my savings whenever you demanded." I let out a small laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Well, surprise, I've built something for myself. And you? You have nothing to do with it." My mother's hand clenched into a fist. "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "We're your family." I tilted my head. "Family?" A family doesn't abandon someone on the side of the road because they refuse to be a personal bank. Gareth checked his watch. "We should go." I met my parents' eyes one last time, watching their expressions shift from anger to uncertainty. For the first time in my life, they realized they had no power over me. I turned on my heel and stepped toward the helicopter. Gareth held out a hand, helping her climb aboard. As she fastened the seatbelt, she caught one last glimpse of her parents through the window. Her mother's mouth slightly open, her father's face drained of color. Ethan's phone slipping from his hand. The helicopter lifted off, and for the first time in years, Michelle felt free. The next morning, I sat across from Gareth in his spacious office, my fingers gripping the edge of the polished desk. A thick folder lay between us, its contents more than just numbers on paper. They were the secrets my parents had kept from me, the lies that had finally unraveled. "Are you sure you want to see this?" Gareth asked, his expression unreadable. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I need to know." With a slow exhale, he flipped the folder open. My eyes scanned the documents, credit card statements, overdue loans, and then the worst of it. A loan application bearing my name. They took out a loan using my identity. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Not just one," Gareth said grimly, tapping another page. "They've been using your credit for years. This second mortgage, your name's on that too." My hands trembled as I clenched the papers. All the times they'd guilt-tripped me, all the moments they'd called me selfish. It had never been about my brother. It had been about them, about covering their own financial disasters. Gareth leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "You have two choices. You can confront them, demand they pay you back. Or I press charges, I finish for him." The words felt foreign on my tongue. He nodded. "Fraud is a serious crime, Michelle. If you want justice, I can help." I took a shaky breath. Confrontation was what they expected. A screaming match, a desperate plea for them to explain. But I was done being the victim. My parents had crossed a line, and now it was my turn to act. I met Gareth's gaze, a newfound resolve settling in my chest. "Tell me what I need to do." A slow, approving smirk spread across his face. "Let's make sure they regret ever underestimating you." In the evening, Michelle and Gareth were sitting in a coffee shop, the documents spread before her like the final pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. Bank statements, loan agreements, each one a betrayal, each one proving just how little her parents had ever cared about her well-being. She took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the table. "So what's the plan?" Gareth leaned back in his chair, watching her with an amused yet serious expression. "You have every legal right to take action, but I need to hear it from you." Michelle's fingers tightened around a document. "I want to hit them where it hurts. No more chances, no more bailing them out." Gareth nodded approvingly. "Good. Then we start with freezing your credit. That cuts off any future damage." He tapped a few keys on his laptop, sending a few messages to his legal team. "That's step one." Step two came quickly. Michelle filed an official fraud report with the bank, submitting all necessary evidence. Her parents' world would start crumbling within days. The house, already in jeopardy due to unpaid debts. Their credit, destroyed, and the money they stole. She had legal grounds to demand repayment, something they would never be able to afford. Later that evening, her phone buzzed. A call from her mother. "You ungrateful brat. How could you do this to us?" Her mother's shrill voice filled the speaker. Michelle smiled coldly. "I didn't do anything, you did. You made your choices and now you get to live with them." Her mother's voice cracked. "We're losing everything." "Good," Michelle said simply before ending the call. Gareth chuckled. That went well. Michelle exhaled, feeling lighter than she had in years. It's not over yet. The final blow came when her father, once proud and domineering, left her a voicemail, his voice shaking, pleading for a way out. But Michelle had already decided. "They used me," she murmured, deleting the message. "Now they'll know what it feels like to lose everything." Gareth placed a hand on her shoulder. "And they'll never see it coming." The courtroom was silent as the judge shuffled through the final documents. My parents sat stiffly, their faces pale, their eyes darting to me with a mixture of anger and desperation. They had spent years controlling me, using me, and now they were on the verge of losing everything. "The court finds the defendants guilty of fraud and identity theft," the judge announced, his voice firm. "All fraudulent assets will be seized, and restitution must be paid to the victim." A heavy silence followed. My mother let out a sharp gasp, her hands gripping the edge of the table. My father exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This isn't fair," my mother hissed under her breath. "She's our daughter." I met her gaze, feeling nothing but cold resolve. "You made your choices." Outside the courtroom, Gareth stood waiting. He gave me a nod of approval. It's over. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift. Yes, it is. The bank reclaimed the house, and parents' debts swallowed what little they had left. Their car was repossessed, and soon they had nowhere to turn. In desperation, they moved in with my younger brother, hoping for sympathy. But even he, after enduring their manipulative ways for just 10 days, threw them out onto the street. With no other options, they ended up in a rented, squalid hut on the outskirts of the city, far from the comfortable life they once flaunted. They had spent years using me, seeing me only as a source of money. Now they had nothing, and I felt nothing for them in return. No guilt, no regret, only freedom. 3 months later, I stood in an elegant white dress, holding Gareth's hand. He had been my pillar, my strength, and now my future. As I looked into his eyes, I knew this was my real family. A fresh start, a life without manipulation, a future built on respect and love. My parents had lost everything, but I had gained everything that truly mattered.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.